It goes without saying that the person of Christ is central to the Christian faith. But the Apostle Paul, too, is a very important figure in Christianity. Yet there are many skeptical scholars who try to dismiss Paul as being just one among many different spiritual leaders that have existed throughout human history. They try to lump Paul together with, for example, Joseph Smith, who established Mormonism, or Muhammad, who established Islam. And so the question on the table today, is Paul just another spiritual leader, or is there something special about who he was? I'm joined today by Christian scholar Dr. Travis Campbell to help unpack these questions. So Travis, is Paul just like Muhammad and Joseph Smith, or is there something unique about Paul?
There's a lot that's unique about Paul. In fact, I'd like to tell you a story. Years ago, I was watching Tovia Singer, who I think is the greatest living defender of traditional Judaism, give a talk where he said that the reason Judaism stands out as the true faith is that with other religions, you just have some guy walking around claiming to have received a revelation from God. So Muhammad goes into a cave, has a vision, has what looks like an epileptic seizure, comes out, is convinced by his wife and her cousin that he has been inspired or experienced a revelation of God. And next thing you know, he's starting to attract hundreds and then thousands of people into his religion. At no point was there any confirmatory evidence from one person to another that Muhammad was receiving a revelation from God. Same thing with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith walks into the woods, finds what he claims to be golden tablets, being led there by God himself. And then next thing you know, he's starting this religion. No one has ever seen the golden tablets. No one has ever had the same revelatory experiences. Singer says that Judaism started out a whole lot differently than those two religions, because in Judaism, you have God revealing himself to an entire nation of people. A whole nation sat at the foot of Sinai. They saw the miracles leading up to that event, the miracles in Egypt, the plagues, and so forth, and then also the splitting of the Red Sea. And they saw God reveal himself to Moses, or at least they saw the aftermath of it. Moses descends down, and he has the tablets of the law. This is the only religion that's ever started off that way. It wasn't one guy. It was an entire people that experienced God's revelation. And Singer says, well, really, you have the same thing going with Christianity. One guy named Jesus walks around and says, I'm the Son of God. One guy named Paul walks around and says, I've received a revelation of God. Now, at no point when I heard Singer give this presentation did he offer an apologetic for the authenticity of the Torah. This is very important because the vast majority of scholars living today think that the Torah is the product of the 6th century BC. And as a product of the 6th century BC, that means that the Torah would have been written, 600 to 1,000 years after the events purportedly took place. And so any skeptic could say, well, how do we know that this story of God revealing himself to an entire people is even true? The claim is bold, but the evidentiary support may very well be weak. As a traditional Christian who believes that Moses wrote the Torah, that's not much of a problem for me. I do believe Singer is right, that God revealed himself to an entire people on Mount Sinai. But apologetically, going into the academy and saying such a thing is very controversial because no one's going to grant the authenticity of the Torah and therefore the truthfulness of the story. Paul is actually a great counterexample to what Singer's trying to prove regarding Christianity. Because, as everyone knows, Paul starts off as an enemy of the faith. And I don't have to tell Christians this point. Christians have long been impressed by the fact that with the Apostle Paul, we have an enemy of the faith who's converted. How do you explain his conversion? Well, Paul himself says, I converted because Christ appeared to me. But you also have something very interesting going on in the epistle to the Galatians. In Galatians 1, Paul says, Christ revealed himself in me. There's the claim to revelation. And if Paul had stopped right there, he would be no different than Joseph Smith or Muhammad or whoever. But in the following verses, he tells us that 3 years after his conversion, this is within 5 years of the crucifixion itself, Paul is in Jerusalem interviewing Peter and James and getting the correct information about who Jesus was. And then 14 years after that, he is submitting his own gospel, his own preaching to the apostles in Jerusalem, making sure that his gospel is in continuity with theirs. You don't have anything like that with the other religious leaders. They are receiving revelations, but it's not like Muhammad went to the Jews of his day or the Christians of his day and said, are the revelations I'm receiving in continuity with what has gone on before? We know that he doesn't do that, because when the Christians and the Jews began to argue with him and saying that you're not receiving the revelation from our God because your revelation contradicts our revelation, Muhammad pronounced curses on the Christians and the Jews as a result of that. Same thing with Joseph Smith. He did not submit his revelation to what went before. So in Paul, you not only have one of the most important people regarding the deliverances of doctrine to the Christian church, but apologetically, his own testimony is an apologetic for the faith, because first of all, he's an enemy who converted, which is hard to explain unless Jesus had appeared to him, but also he's a man who received a revelation that was put to the test. In this case, he submitted it to the authority of the apostolic college that had gone on before him. For that reason, he's extremely important.